A beginning, at least so says the UN chief, with world leaders gathered in the German capital this past weekend, promising to stop interfering in the country's civil war and vowing to uphold the much violated arms embargo, as the Security Council met to build on the outcomes of Berlin.
There's still a long way to go. We have a truce. The truce is having some violations, but not widespread violations. They are localized until now. We need to move to a ceasefire, and from the ceasefire we need to move a real political process. And we are not yet there. And so this meeting of the Security Council is very important, and the pressure of the international community over the parties to the conflict and those that have an influence on them to make sure that this roadmap is implemented.
The Berlin communiqué called for a permanent ceasefire, committed world leaders to fully respecting the arms embargo, a return to a Libyan-led and UN-supported political process, security sector reform, economic and financial reform, particularly over the country's oil wealth, and respect for international humanitarian law and human rights in Libya.
You talked about the credibility of...
We pressed the UN chief on whether the Council had the credibility to enforce the arms embargo, given the already multiple violations by UN member states.
One thing that it's important to note is that the heads of state and government, or representatives of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, were in Berlin. They subscribed the Berlin communiqué, and the Berlin communiqué is very strong in what regards, for instance, the arms embargo that until now has been violated in forms that are totally unacceptable. So I think there is a reason to hope that conditions for a stronger consensus in the Security Council about Libya to be created.
As the focus now shifts to a product that Council members can agree on to support the Berlin outcomes, and how to get buy-in from the UN-backed government of Fayez al-Sarraj and renegade commander Khalifa Haftar.
We are looking into how do we get Sarraj and Haftar, the players itself, Libyan players. They were not in Berlin. It was all key important players. Now we are discussing how do we bring the process back home. Actually, moving from truce to ceasefire. In this case, we need General Haftar and his colleagues in the east to come to the party. Secondly, there is so many foreign fighters. What do you do with them in the ceasefire process? Secondly, you have the neighbors. You have Chad, Niger, Somalia, Sudan. You have all. What do you do with them? And fourth is the arms which are already now in Libya. What do we do with those arms?
A follow-up mechanism that could involve an observer force, if not a fully fledged peacekeeping force, as negotiations in the Council get underway. Ambassador Machila also lamented the peripheral role that had been given to African countries and the African Union in particular on the Libyan file, but suggested that sentiment was shifting as this process moved from Berlin into what he's referred to as the implementation phase. He said the African Union would have to play a central role, particularly neighboring countries of Niger, Chad, Sudan, Egypt and Algeria, among others. Quote, implementation, I think they need us. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.